Well, you're a little far away for my older eyes, so I'm not really sure. No. Do you want to swing around and have them introduce, or at least tell what school district they're from if I don't know who?
Okay. Linda, do you want to start? Want to wave?
Oh, yeah. Hi, Linda. How are you?
Hi, Sue. It's me, Christine.
Hello. How are
How
you?
are you?
Yeah. We won't even go there. So.
And then
We won't tell them how we know each other.
I won't. I wouldn't mention it.
Rachel Spielman, Stony Brook, second grade.
Okay.
Katie Sheffer, Stony Brook, second grade as well.
Okay.
Jody Wareheim, I'm a reading specialist in Spring Grove School District in New Salem, Elementary.
I'm missing that last part.
nice.
I'm a reading specialist at New Salem Elementary School in Spring Grove.
In Spring Grove. Okay, great.
Okay.
Regina Peckman, Roundtown, moving.
Hi, Regina.
How are you?
I'm well.
And then Annie Kushat, Sinking Spring.
Hi, Annie. How are you?
Good.
And
Good. My phone's going to be ringing a little bit here. I just made a whole bunch of phone calls, and people are going to call back and leave me messages. So, I'm just going to try it. Hopefully it won't. Yeah. Okay, so.
okay, and Sue Shu is here too. She just stepped out, I think, to use the restroom.
Okay, great. So, it's been a good week so far. I'm hoping that it's nice to be able to totally focus on one particular subject area and collaborate and get some new ideas.
Hi, this is Gloria Jean returning your call. You should be able to call my cell phone now. It's 570
Yeah.
337
Okay, sorry.
7424. You said you were calling about the summit next week?
Yeah, my time.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so my timing has been bad here. So, Amy, I was going to talk a little bit about the Ink Think Tank and the grant, with the idea of some nonfiction literature and yeah, I got it, hon. Yeah, I got it, Kirby. This is the downside of Skyping. Okay,
That's what
Skyping from home. So, no. Okay. And I'm on my Skype call. Don't interrupt anymore, please.
I love it.
Okay. Anyway, Amy, have you had a chance to discuss that at all? Like, since you had brought Roz into the mix?
Well, here's what we did yesterday. We talked to Roz, and we talked a little bit about how we use the idea of Lewis and Clark to write biographies of people, but just for that moment of time that was really important in their life. And then she had mentioned Ink Think Tank and shared that resource. But what we were doing right before you called was we were getting ready to do some TPAC tinkering where we were going to share some resources and things. And Ink Think Tank was there, but we didn't do that yet. So.
Okay, well, let me give you just a real brief background as to how we became involved in them. When the Common Core started to surface and people were talking about it all the time, I was hearing all of this, people make statements about, oh, kids have to read nonfiction now and how boring it is. And, they'll be reading instruction manuals and, ridiculous things that will be, not interesting to them and so on and so forth. And although there is certainly a place for all of that, there are an awful lot, as you guys well know, nonfiction books out there that are interesting. They're written like novels. Many of them are of historical value, but they also cover all subject areas. And in the course of doing some research on that, I came across Ink Think Tank, which is a consortium of authors that write nonfiction books for young children and young adults. I contacted the woman who originally started the whole thing, and she could not have been any more gracious in helping us with the grant that we were writing, which was through the Library of Congress, and I'll mention that in just a minute as well. The authors are very involved in the doing things, helping teachers and students do things appropriately in the area of nonfiction, how they do the research and the background types of information. So in addition to Roz with our grant, we also worked with a woman named Andrea Warren, who's written many, many books, and usually from about 4th, 5th grade on up. We worked with Jim Murphy, who has tons of books to his credit, and we work with Carla McClafferty, who is very highly renowned in her area as well. She wrote, and she really worked with us on the Common Core part of things. And Amy can give you a little bit more detail on that. You'll find bios of all of those authors and many more on the Inc. Think Tank site. But what's really nice about the Inc. Think Tank site is there's a database there. So have you not had a chance to look at the database yet?
No.
Okay, well, why don't we take a little look? You guys can just grab your own computers right there and go to that particular area, inkthinktank.com, and we can see how we can make this work. And while you are bringing that up, Andrea Warren, and I've got a couple books here, and I don't know if Amy and Katie told you, I'll probably be stopping by just a little bit tomorrow too. But I do some work with the Library of Congress in the area of bringing primary sources into your classroom. And that, of course, is a major part of the Common Core as well. And I have a couple of examples of books here that I think some of you might find very interesting. I should have never made those phone calls beforehand. This one is called The Orphan Train Rider. And
cell phone PA.
No, that's not it.
I don't know why. Are you guys getting there? Think. Did you get to the website yet?
No.
Yeah, me neither. I'm having a lot of trouble with it. I don't know what's going on here.
Hi, Sue. My name is Pam Craig. I'm calling back about the EduSpire course for the Keystones Summit next week. I did register for the course, and I did pay through PayPal on May 14th, 2014. It went through. It's on my account. I was charged to my Discover card, so I'm not sure why it's not showing up. If you want to give me a call back, maybe we can troubleshoot and figure out what is going on, since I'm sure that I paid. I see it on my statement, and I've been working on actually paying that off. So my phone number is 610-304-8826. Thank you so much.
Okay, I'm going to go back and restart my browser because I'm having trouble. You guys didn't get in it either?
Yep.
Oh, you did? Okay, well, it is one of these, free sites here. But anyway, I wanted to point out Andrea Warren to you, this book called The Orphan Train Riders. And what was interesting about this was, I don't know if Amy told you or not, but in the grant, we worked with Greg Wimmer from the high school, and the Orphan Train Riders were something that he had never really heard of before, and I consider him to be, very, very knowledgeable in the area of American history, and so it really started to interest me a whole lot, and I started to read more and more about it. And ironically, there's a fiction, a historical fiction book for adults now.
Oh, okay. There's one for children as well.
In our conference call with her and the 5th grade, the story itself is really amazing because it talks about these kids from New York City who lost their parents for a variety of reasons. Their parents were immigrants. They died, or they came to this country, without their parents, and they were living on the streets in New York City. And a minister then started to make connections for them around the country, to, work on farms, and they ended up being adopted and so on. And this is the story of one of these young men. He happened to be alive still back in the, late 50s, 60s, 70s. I don't remember exactly when Andrea wrote the book. But the bottom line with it that was even more interesting than the story itself was that this was really the beginning of the foster care system in the United States, and how all of those things got started. And it was just so historically amazing that there was so much from it. And when you look through some of these books that, and I will bring them along with me tomorrow so you can look at them a little more firsthand, they not only have the stories in them told in incredibly interesting ways, but they also have primary source documents. So by using books like this, you're killing 1 million Common Core stones with, all at one time. You've got the nonfiction piece going. You've got some social studies, which I know sometimes is a little difficult to work into the elementary classroom with all the other pressures that you have on math and social and language arts. That social studies sometimes just becomes whatever's in the book. So this is a great way to incorporate all of that. You've got research behind it. And what was really interesting was when we finished with Andrea, she challenged the kids in the class to learn more about their families, and to start to write about those and to pull together their family stories. And we did it in Gwen Hubb's class. I don't know how many of you know Gwen from North Hills, but she told the kids, how much she wished she knew more about her family's life at this point. So it just had so many benefits, and so many items that were covered by using just this one particular book in that classroom. They could build a whole unit and cover so much with it. But the other thing, and I, for some reason, am not connecting to Ink Think Tank, so I have no idea why I'm not.
I do have it up.
But
Sue.
the database you will see there, can y'all get into the database?
I have it up on the screen.
Okay,
Yep.
can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Okay, for a minute there, I got nothing, so I just don't know what's going on with our connection around here. Last night I was on and it was really bad too.
We're
The database itself, what's really interesting about the Ink Think Tank database is that when we think of primary sources and we think of some of nonfiction, a lot of times we think of the social studies part of it. And yet there are quite a number of authors out there who are writing things. Okay, I think I'm in now. And I don't think you guys can search the database until you make yourselves an account,
Yep.
correct?
Yep. Correct.
Okay. And that just takes like seconds to do. But when you look at their database, you can go in and you can find books by selecting the grade level, the publication year, the subject area. And so what's really nice is if you teach second grade, you can say, I only want books that are K1, 2, and I only want books about science, or I only want books about health. And then it will give you a list of nonfiction researched books written at that grade level and pertaining to that particular subject area. So the database is really quite nice. And it will, you will find, at least we did when we worked on the grant, you will find that there are quite a number of the books already on here in your libraries, or in one of the libraries, if not yours, maybe at North Hills or Sinking Springs or something like that. So, Amy, can you give them a little time then to look at the database then?
Absolutely.
Okay. And then when you're on the website, there's also some things about the authors. And not every author that has written these types of books is part of Ink Think Tank, but the authors who are part of the organization are willing to do video conferencing, and there's a fee. There's definitely a fee involved in that, but sometimes if I know that PTOs or whatever are saying, hey, we've got an extra $300. What would you like to do with that? This might be something, especially if you can get 2 or 3 classes together, that you would want to work on. So that's the, kind of the down and dirty, as fast as possible thing about the authors that are involved here. I have to say, working with them, it is the whole experience was just so amazing because I knew being an author was hard work. I mean, anybody who doesn't know that is a little out to lunch. But it was just very interesting to hear how the different approaches that they use in what they are trying to write. For instance, Jim Murphy, he talked to the kids at the high school. Now, these are AP kids. So, they're your top of the line kids interested in American history and, wanting to learn more. And he was talking to them about a book that he wrote about the Chicago fire. And he mentioned how well researched nonfiction has to be, that a lot of times he will try and verify as much as he can put into it with at least 2 different sources, if at all possible, and that he does not make up any details at all, even things like street names. He wants to make sure that they are as accurate as possible. Well, you would not believe the conversation that brought about with the kids afterwards, because these kids were like, what's the big deal? Who cares if the street name's off or, whatever. And when we explained to them that, if you're really reading something from a nonfiction point of view, and, you find even the slightest thing that is not accurate, you question everything in the book. And Mr. Wimmer then brought out A Team of Rivals. I don't know if you're familiar with that. It's the Doris Kearns Goodwin book that was on which the movie Lincoln was based, about the guys that Lincoln surrounded himself with. And the book is like 800 pages or something. But I think the last 200 or 300 pages are nothing more than her references.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, it's pretty amazing stuff when you get into the amount of work that's done with this. And but if you can get people to write, if you can start to work with some nonfiction books, I think it brings a whole new interest level to your students, because a lot of these books are written as I say sort of as novels, but they are nonfiction. And then also part of that grant, we also did work with Myra Zarnowski, who wrote the book. What's the name of that book, Amy? About history.
The history one. I have to bring it tomorrow.
Okay.
I forget the actual name of it, but I use it all the time.
Yeah, there's all kinds of that. That is a book well worth the purchase, if only to get all kinds of activities that you can bring into your classroom from it. She relates them to different books that have been written, nonfiction books that have been written, but it's quite good, and she was very, very helpful to us as we got started with the grant. So I would think that that would lead us into a little bit more. When you're doing work with nonfiction, of course, you want to work with the most accurate information as possible. You're doing research, you're finding possibly historical documents, or you're working with survey data, or whatever the case may be, but you're trying to pull together as much information as you possibly can. And that leads us into primary sources, which is another big part of the Common Core. And the work that I do with the Library of Congress is to help teachers to start to use primary sources as something more than just showing kids a picture of something, but to really make them think about things and make the connections to how history relates to today, and so on and so forth. And if you will now take a look, or just open up a new tab and go to LOC, Library of Congress, loc.gov/teachers. Okay, you will see that the Library of Congress has tons of things that they have already developed for classroom use. If you click on the classroom use section there, you will see 5 sections.
Mm-hmm.
The first one is primary source sets. These are groups of primary sources that they have already put together based on a particular topic. So, what kid's not interested in baseball? And so there's already a group of primary source documents that have been pulled together all about baseball. Okay, are you finding those, Amy?
Yes.
Now, some of them may not be appropriate for some of the lower grade levels, but then you could also maybe just find a photograph or something. In working with some different classes with the primary sources, kids, of course, really relate to pictures, and even things like pictures of old school buildings, school rooms, old grocery stores, any of that type of thing, to help kids, kind of understand what things were like back in the day, as you're talking about, because they just don't relate. And you guys all know how important it is to make those connections, and these different photographs will help you do that. If you go back to the classroom materials section, there's lesson plans that have already been created. There's several hundred in there. The presentations and activities, the activities are actually online activities, so it's a great way to have the kids use some technology in your classroom with some of the primary source stuff. So there's a lot of things that are already created for you here. And if you look at the professional development section, if you are so inclined, one of the sections there is to take online modules.
Okay, we're there.
Are we good with that?
Yep.
Okay, and if you go to view self-directed modules, you'll see that there are 6 different modules there. They say it take about an hour to go through. It's usually slightly less than that. But it will talk about how you can use primary sources to have kids develop their inquiry skills, analyze the prints and photographs, all kinds of things there. So if this is something that is of interest to you, you can learn more about it kind of on your own. So I always make a plug for that because somewhere along the line, if you're talking about nonfiction and good research, you should be using the terms primary sources. And I don't think that the kids can be any too young to hear that term. One of the activities that I've seen done very nicely with younger grades is the game, we used to call it Whisper Down the Valley, where, one kid says something to the next kid, and the next kid says something to the next kid, and, after about 5 kids, it's pretty screwed up. And so using that activity, you can make the point to the kids that the closer you can get to somebody who viewed the original of something, the more accurate it is going to be. But again, it's always important to point out too that even though might be a primary source, there's still a perspective to it. So there's a great book for kindergarten, 1st and 2nd grade called Voices in the Park. I believe the author is Anthony Brown.
Yep.
It's Brown. Yeah. Okay. And that is all on perspective. So, if you're talking about that, that's a great little book to use as well. So I didn't know how far we wanted to go with some of this stuff, but those I think were the 2 things that we were going to just briefly show was the idea of Ink Think Tank and the Library of Congress stuff. Is that okay, Amy?
How to make a paper slide video.
Hold on.
What is a paper slide video?
Okay, I clicked on the wrong tab.
That's
So
okay. You know what, Sue?
Yeah.
There's a couple of things here that stood out. One of them being that, we do have some early literacy kind of kids, teachers, 1st grade, 2nd grade, but these pictures are timeless and they help create historical context, which is really good. It could be used across all grade levels. And Annie was asking yesterday about, she mentioned the Library of Congress and how it's hard to find things, and I just agreed with her.
yes.
And I didn't realize that there were these online modules. So this is something that I'm definitely making sure that I do because I spend a lot of time searching and then getting frustrated.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you something else too, and even the people that train for the Library of Congress will tell this too. Sometimes you're better off going into Google Advanced Search.
Yep.
Instead of going to the Library of Congress site and trying to use their search editor. It has improved over the years, but still not great. But you know, when you go into Google and you go to the advanced search, you can say, make all my results come from a particular site. So are you aware of that, Amy?
Yes.
Okay, so if you just say, you know, put in there, make sure all my results come from loc.gov, it actually works better than going to loc.gov and doing your research, your searching there. So yeah, we were looking for a map one day, and we knew we had that map, but we didn't. We must have written something down incorrectly, or you know, copied it wrong, and we went through, I'll bet 10, 15 minutes trying to find that map again, and then we went to Google and just said, you know, map from whatever, and then loc.gov, and it popped up right away. So that's kind of an easier way to search there.
I don't often do that. I've heard of that before, but I typically come here.
Yeah, it's and you know, it's great to say that you'll be able to find it immediately. But the other thing too, as the library developed the way they put their stuff online, they've switched it now. But back in the early days of developing databases, they how do I want to say this? Some of the links were actually not permanent links, like you would think of something being stored in an actual location, but their old technology did not do that. So sometimes you would find something and you would have a link for it, but that link disappeared the minute you left that page.
Oh, okay.
So that's why it's very difficult to go back and find some of the stuff that you already had found. So you always want to look for the permanent link, which is usually somewhere in the description part of a photograph. Or make sure you get the name and then just go to Google and Google it. So.
Yep. And
okay.
And we, I think this was very helpful. And I was just thinking, you know, this morning, Sue Shu shared a lesson about owls. And they do like a big activity with owls and read about owls and write about owls. But they also take a look at owl pellets. And just having that real thing that is actual, that's a primary artifact. Came from an
isn't
owl,
that
right?
charming?
Right? I mean, even then you can say, hey, listen, this is the real... Yeah. Am I right, Sue? So.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. People, and this is something, again, as you get into studying primary things before, perhaps instead of saying primary source documents, we should use the term primary artifacts, because an artifact certainly is something that kids are actually creating their own artifacts each and every day. We're doing an online course right now, just a little 1-credit course on primary sources, and one of the teachers that's in there has her activity was called an artifact museum walk, and she has a bunch of artifacts, and the kids brought in some artifacts, and then the kids had to determine whether they were primary or secondary, and why. And you know, I thought it was really great that they brought in some of their own stuff to help to make that connection. And Amy, you've done a lot of that with your kids, where you know, they actually spoke to a person who witnessed a particular event, or you know, they brought pictures in. I'll just never forget that Bible, that one. It was a boy, wasn't it?
I'm trying to remember.
I think it was it Carolyn Foz's son?
Oh my golly, yes.
Yeah. I just thought that was like so amazing that you know, they put that all together, and how that really, learning that about his family, like, increased the value of that to him.
Yeah.
The Bible, I guess it's a Bible that everybody in his family carries when they get married, and it goes back generations or something.
Yeah. I forgot all about that. You're right.
Yeah, there were some really interesting things. We've had some. There was a couple of years ago, well, more than a couple now, but there was a young lady at the middle school, and they had to interview a member of their family for something, and here she found out that her grandma was at Hiroshima. You know, I mean, was involved in that. She would have never known that, you know, without this assignment, which is pretty cool. And how about the young lady in your class whose grandma marched with Martin Luther King?
I know that. Yeah.
Holy crap. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I find that stuff incredibly fascinating, and it really helps kids make connections, not only to the historical stuff, but to the fact that, everything doesn't have to be Harry Potter and, Game of Thrones and all the nonfiction or the fiction stuff, which, again, there's nothing wrong with that. It's all very interesting. And if it gets them to read, that's wonderful. But, there are a lot of people out there that will only read nonfiction, and a lot of kids are not introduced to it until much later in life because a lot of people think that it's kind of boring. And, when you get into some of these books, you're going to find that, they're very, very, very interesting, and you can go quite a long time on them. And the database at Ink Think Tank will help you find some of those titles that are appropriate to your grade level. So.
Does anybody have any questions for Sue?
I'm just
Chris has one.
To exploring all of this now because I didn't know it was here.
I can't hear. What?
I'm looking forward to exploring all of this.
Okay, great. Yes, yeah. And the thing about, especially the Library of Congress or any of those sites is you can spend hours. Like, you just get so involved in looking stuff because one thing leads to another, leads to another, leads to another. And there's a great activity. And actually, Amy, are you familiar with the Lincoln's Pockets activity?
Yes.
Okay, maybe you can point that out to them because that's something you could do not just with those artifacts, but with anything. What it really makes kids ask questions and think about how things are related, and who really cares what was in Lincoln's pockets the night that he was assassinated? But the fact that it makes them really look at what this was, or oh my gosh, I had no idea that people only traveled by train back then. This is a real old story. But I remember when I was still in the classroom, it was the beginning of the Ethiopian crisis where, the drought was just horrendous and people were starving to death, daily. And we were talking about it one day in class, and this young man, I can picture where he sat. I know his name. He raised his hand and he said, well, I don't feel sorry for them at all. And I said, I don't understand why you would say that. And he said, well, why don't they just go get a job? And to which I said, and where would that be? And he goes, well, there's McDonald's everywhere. They could even just go and work at McDonald's. And, that realization there that these kids just don't have these experiences, and anything that we can do to help make those experiences a little bit more real to them not only helps their knowledge level, but I think it helps us develop maybe more empathetic society, which, we could use. So... But I will not digress any longer on that. So.
Anyone else? And you know what, Sue, we were just briefly talking about TPAC and how you want to definitely get that technology to that sweet spot where it transforms the learning. And some of these artifacts, you wouldn't get if you didn't get them off of the Library of Congress site,
goodness.
And even the video. I've listened to music from the Library of Congress, and those are things that are pretty priceless, and definitely transform the learning.
I'll tell you another website, and this is connected to the Library of Congress. It's sort of like all the Library of Congresses around the world, and it's called the World Digital Library, WDL.org.
What, say that again?
WDL.org, because, when you're dealing with the Library of Congress, pretty much you're dealing with American history. But at some point in your classrooms, when you're talking about continents or whatever, you might want to take a look at this, because what they've done is they've divided it into sections of the world. So you could pull up European artifacts, documents, artifacts, pictures, whatever. You can find them by time period. So if you're studying, let's say you would be studying our Civil War, you could also go in and say, well, what else was going on in the world between 1800 and 1865? It's just another, it's a connection, another way to grab pictures of artifacts. And, our kids don't even realize how old our country is, or lack of age compared to other parts of the world. So, it's another resource that you can look at. But there are primary source documents out there all over the place. And Amy, have you shared with them the whale site?
No.
Okay,
but I will this afternoon.
By the way, just a quick aside, just for Amy, she no longer works for the museum. The Cape Cod.
She
school,
doesn't.
No, the Cape Cod school system hired her as a librarian. So yeah.
Okay.
So that's kind of a bummer. But
that is a bummer.
Anyway, I always liked that site. There's another site called Dear Daddy, which I think that sounds like creepy, but it's a bunch of letters written about farming in back in I think the early 1900s.
Okay.
So, there's all kinds of ways that you can bring these in and make them interesting, and then, have kids find their own letters and do that sort of thing. I'm really going off on a tangent here that I was not.
You're giving us a lot of good information.
Well, I don't want to do that. I mean, you guys have plenty of things to do in time. But anyway, there's, a couple of great websites out there that are just nice collections of primary source. The Library of Congress is great, but it's not the only place out there. And certainly, your kids can bring in their own primary source documents and artifacts, which we talked about, but they can also collect information. It's a great way to bring math in, by having them create surveys using Google Forms, where, they're using accurate data. Just like census data is another way to bring math in, and you're using, primary source data to do that. So it's not just all about social studies, as we said before, but you can bring in just about any subject area with that. Even we even talked to some family science people from the high school, even like old recipes and how they used to do stuff. I mean, do you ever see a recipe anymore that says Crisco in it? I mean, if you said to kids, "Oh, put some Crisco in that today," they would have no clue. Maybe some of you don't have any clue, but. It's just kind of interesting how things change and why they change. So,
well, we would like to thank you very much.
Okay, well, you are quite welcome. I will see you again briefly tomorrow, somewhere between 2:30 and 3 o'clock. And I will bring these couple of books along just so that you can glance through them if you're not familiar with the types of books. But I know that your libraries are loaded with them. When we started the grant, Shelley Eaton just brought a ton of books that were just at North Hills alone. So they're pretty easy to come by. And I'll also see if I can dig that Myra's book out too.
Okay, and I have that at home. I'm 99% sure because I usually keep
Okay.
it. Okay,
Awesome.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, well,
Bye.
enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Okay, bye, Sue.
Thanks, Sue.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Bye.